Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Thursday, and we're getting ready to see a change in the weather pattern here in the eastern states. And, it came off an absolutely remarkable day of record highs on Wednesday, where not only did we set record highs, but we recorded some of the highest temperatures we've ever seen for so late in the month of October. But that's done today because we have this high that's built into the north, and there's a weather front. If I'm going to just show you here how the profile has changed in terms of the atmosphere. We went from having a west and northwest wind yesterday. Now we've got this kind of a warm front that's set up to our south. And here's the frontal zone to the west, which has got the wave that's developing on it. And you can see it here. Whoops. I don't want to do that. Okay, so for whatever reason, it's just being evil. All right, so it's my evil finger, actually. Sometimes I delete things on Facebook by accident on the phone because of my fat finger. Okay, so here we have the onshore flow that's setting up. And what it is, you've got this high that's to the north. And remember, winds are clockwise around highs. So that's going to bring in more of a northeast to east wind across New Jersey, Long Island, southern New England, the Hudson Valley, eastern Pennsylvania, down into Delaware and Maryland. So that cools things off, and you kind of have to wait for this wave to move northeastward, and then that starts to pull the warm front to the north as this high retreats to the northeast. So everything's kind of moving in tandem here, and when we set it along, you can see what happens. Now, at the same time, down here is that tropical or subtropical or whatever it is, this broad area of low pressure that's been sitting east of the Bahamas. It's actually gotten a little better organized overnight and this morning, and there's an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that's going to fly into it today. In the end, it really makes no difference because as we go into Friday, even if this were to develop into some sort of subtropical or tropical storm, it gets the name out of the way. But what's happening in the eastern states is this low develops over New Jersey, at least on the GFS, so we'll look at the European in a second, and then that's going to basically absorb all of this. You can kind of see what's happening. The isobar gets sort of stretched out, so the tropical system is actually embedded inside this area here. This is what we call the warm sector of a system. Anything that's ahead of the area that's ahead of the cold front and south of the warm front, that's called the warm sector. So this is where a tropical system can hold itself together because it's embedded in a moist tropical air mass. Behind it is where you have the colder air. So this is our non-tropical system here. This is our tropical system down to the south right there. And what's going to happen is that this system is just going to get absorbed by the one to the north, is the extratropical system. And sometimes what happens is that when in that process, tropical moisture gets involved, things get juiced up a little bit. I was kind of looking for the idea that maybe that would happen in order to produce some much needed rainfall. And actually what's happening is a lot of that is translating instead up in this area. So, the area in central and northern New England and into parts of western New York going to get a decent amount of rain out of this, and actually more than a decent amount of rain. And then you can see what happens during the day on Saturday. This low intensifies and winds up bringing down cold Canadian air. So we see rain changing over to snow on the west side and probably the higher elevations of upstate New York, and then eventually working its way up into Vermont and parts of northern New Hampshire and Maine. So those areas are going to see their first measurable snows. Now, we're going to get a shot of cold air to come into the northeast for the weekend. It's actually two shots because there's a secondary shot, and you can pick it out here right there. There's a secondary shot that comes through on Monday, and that's going to set us up for perhaps a widespread freeze across New York State, much of interior New England, and even extending down to parts of the coastal areas, maybe into all of northeastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, and interior Connecticut will probably see their first freezes, depending on wind and clouds, Monday night, Tuesday morning, and then again Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, before the high starts to build away to the northeast and pull out, and the next warm front comes through later next week. So it looks like we're settling down into a more typical pattern for this time of year. I just want to show you the tropical system on the satellite this morning, and you can see, if you look carefully, it's such a broad area of low pressure where you've got all this moisture moving in this direction from southwest to northeast, but it looks like there's a very small concentrated area of showers and thunderstorms, and maybe there's some kind of low-level circulation that's trying to take shape on the eastern edge of this. They're sending an Air Force plane to check it out, but it's so small and so broad an area. I mean, I really don't anticipate anything coming much out of this. And I want to go, I promised my friends up in the Canadian Maritimes that we would look at their area. Okay. I always have to remember that, because you guys really, you asked for it, and I really, it's helping me to learn how things work up here. So I'll show you what happens with this weather system, and we'll back it up. So here's Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. You have a nice high that pulls away for Friday, and then you get into some rain. It looks like much of it is going to be north and west, although even into Newfoundland you get into a good shot of rain here. This storm gets fairly deep, so you've got some sort of an occluded front here that sticks out like that at this point. And a warm front that's that way. So there's probably going to be some decent rain and showers, and you'll notice that there's a fair amount of snow that's generated up to the northwest, up in parts of Labrador and back through Quebec. The storm system stays pretty much to your west, so the cold air doesn't really translate down to the coast until very late in the period, when you finally get low pressure to move out sometime around Tuesday night, Wednesday of next week, and then you get into some of the chillier air, but it's really more north and west of you that's going to see that. You might get into some pretty decent wind, though. The gradient's fairly tight, so you might get into some a fairly decent wind out of this over the weekend. And let's go just real quick. I want to show you, and then we'll call it a day. I've been kind of putting up these posts about the wintertime. One of the things that we're seeing, and it's very interesting, I'm showing you a very different view here of the upper atmosphere. This is like you can see basically everything from the top of the world, and it really illustrates how gears in the atmosphere work. That's always been my way of explaining it. You got all these gears, these upper lows spinning, and a few upper highs, and they all interact with each other. And you can see how the gears change in size and scope, and one interacts with the other. One of the things that we're seeing longer term is a blocking that appears to be developing as we move through the rest of October and into November. So that, that's going to be key if it happens. It's going to mean for perhaps colder than normal temperatures across the eastern part of the United States, and maybe even getting into a bit of a more stormier period. We'll see. But that's something that we're going to be paying attention to. And also, one of the things, and I'm trying to learn more about how the very top of the atmosphere works, and, looking up in the stratosphere. One of the things I've been reading about with regards to this is, the polar vortex, which is up here, and from the people that really kind of know more about this stuff, they're observing that this upper air structure, this polar vortex that's at the highest of the atmosphere, up in the stratosphere, is relatively weak. And if it stays relatively weak, it would favor, at least in their view, this is AER, which is the Atmospheric and Environmental Research Group. I'll post a link on it. There's a link on it on my website. But their view is that if that remains the case, that's going to mean for a severe winter for much of Europe and into Eurasia, and also into eastern Canada and the eastern United States. Those are the specific areas that they mentioned. So regarding the polar vortex here to the north, which they in the stratosphere, which they say remains very weak. So we're going to be touching upon a lot of this stuff with regards to the winter forecast going forward. So let's call it a day. Have a great Thursday. SSStormchasers.com. When storm chasing is needed, they're there. Meteorologist JoeChaffee.com, weatherlongisland.com, and NYCweathernow.com.